There have been changes made to graphics and interface options for Mastercam. Hardware acceleration option has been moved from the graphics support page in the Mastercam Advanced Configuration dialog box to the Mastercam Launcher dialog box, accessible from the Mastercam 2020 Start Menu folder. There have been changes made to the System Configuration dialog box in the File tab as well. When viewing chains in the Chains Manager, the chains are highlighted in the graphics window. In previous versions of Mastercam, you could not control the color of this highlight. In Mastercam 2020, you can use Chain Highlight in the Colors page to control the highlight color. Color options are available in the System Configuration dialog box. These colors display in various areas of Mastercam. Use the Tools and Holders page to set colors for lathe, mill, and router tools. Use the Simulation Display page to set colors for collision. These colors only apply to Mastercam Simulator. Opacity level of translucency when it is toggled on. Use the opacity slider under Translucent View on the shading page to make adjustments. The dynamic Gnomon can now change between 2D and 3D mode. Use the Change Gnomon Style based on 2D 3D C-plane option in the Gnomon Settings dialog box to control this. This option is enabled by default. Right-click the dynamic Gnomon when you're using it in the graphics window to display the Gnomon Settings dialog box. You can toggle the display of the screen unit and scale by selecting Display. The Fit function now compensates for the selection bar and quick masks so that the shown geometry will no longer be obscured by the overlays. Mastercam includes a number of improvements to speed up design changes to your parts. Mastercam 2020 includes contextual ribbon tabs that display when you select different types. Similar tabs display when you select solid, surface, mesh, or a mixture of geometry types. You can customize the tools that display on these ribbon tabs by going to File tabs from the Customize the Ribbon column on the right side of the Selections tab. You can add your own functions to the ribbon tabs or remove groups of functions. To turn off these contextual ribbon tabs, deselect the Tools checkbox at the top. The Auto Cursor Settings dialog box, opened by selecting Auto Cursor Configuration on the selection bar, has been renamed Selection and added to the System Configuration dialog box. The option on the selection bar has also been renamed to reflect this change. Auto Cursor now supports a Face Center Override mode that places the auto cursor at the center of gravity of the selected face. Select Face Center from the Auto Cursor drop-down on the selection bar or press F to activate this override. A new option, Tangency Tolerance, has been added to the selection page of the System Configuration dialog box. In previous releases, when expanding a selection to tangent faces or edges, the tolerance was limited to neighboring entities that aligned with the selected entity. Mastercam did not recognize a neighboring entity as tangent if the angle variation was greater than 0. This new option allows you to expand the entities that Mastercam recognizes as tangent by entering a value. In previous versions, Mastercam would display the Deleting a Referenced Entity dialog box if the geometry selected for deletion included references to other entities. However, the actions of this dialog were limited to deleting all selected entities or deleting only non-associative entities. Moreover, you were unable to locate the geometry or referenced entities in the graphics window. For Mastercam 2020, this dialog box has been enhanced so that you can visualize and have more control over your deletions. The Show Associative Entities button displays a list of all the referenced geometry you have selected to delete. You can resize the dialog box to show as much or as little of the list as you like. Use the up and down arrow keys or the scroll bar to navigate through the list. If you select an entity in the list, Mastercam locates it in the graphics window and highlights its references to toolpaths, solids, or planes. Select the Display Only Associated Entities in the graphics window option to simplify what displays in the graphics window. Right-click an entity and select Isolate to temporarily display only that entity in the graphics window, Analyze to get more information, or Remove to remove it from the list. Mastercam 2020 includes a number of enhancements to analyze functions. Analyze Entity now includes additional information about associated geometry and operations. Click Association in the Analyze Properties dialog box to check for association to a solid, toolpath, plane, dimension, 3D annotation, or group. This button displays only if the Analyze entity has associated geometry or operations. In previous releases, imported model-based definition or MBD data displayed by Analyze entity was limited to name, type, reference entity, and presentation graphic information. In Mastercam 2020, Analyze Entity also includes the part's semantic data such as tolerance values and subtypes. Analyze Entity also includes a flip button allowing you to reverse the start and end points of the selected line, spline, or arc. Check Solids will now check for tolerant edges and give a more detailed report in the Check Solid dialog box to help you locate any issues your part may have. The dialog box will also display a list of errors even if not all of the entities are displayed. The Polygonal Mesh Properties dialog box now includes a Properties button. This opens the Solid Properties dialog box so you can now view the following information: solid volume and mass relative to a defined density, center of gravity, moment of inertia relative to a selected axis line. Additionally, you can save solid data to a file. There have been a number of enhancements to the Toolpaths Manager for Mastercam 2020. The Highlight Geometry group, which was removed in a previous Mastercam version, has been returned to the Display Options dialog box. When selected, wireframe, machining, or avoidance geometry is highlighted by the chosen color for the selected toolpath. The Dependencies group has been moved from the Display Options dialog box to the Toolpaths Manager toolbar. The new Dependencies toggle allows you to pick one or both of the following. Selection selects all dependent operations when you select the parent. There have also been numerous enhancements to the Planes Manager as well. In previous Mastercam versions, the display column in the Planes Manager determined which planes display when using Find a Plane from Plane. In Mastercam 2020, this column controls which plane nomens display in the graphics area when the Show Nomens button is toggled on. If you select the display column for a plane, an X will appear in the column. With the Show Nomens button toggled on, the nomen for each plane that contains an X in the display column will remain on the screen. By selecting the display column again, which removes the X, the nomen will no longer display on the graphics window. With the Show Nomens button toggled off, all nomens are removed from the graphics window even if the display column is selected. The Find a Plane from Plane option now includes the following options. All displays all plane nomens and prompts you to select one in the graphics window. Selected displays all nomens from the plane selected in the Planes Manager and then prompts you to select one in the graphics window. Displayed displays only the nomens for the planes that have the display column selected and prompts you to select from the graphics window. A new option, Fit Origin, is available in the right-click menu of the Planes Manager. Fit Origin will fit both your part and the origin of the selected plane in the graphics window. The Plane Nomen Settings dialog box includes new options to control the display of the plane nomens. Use the opacity slider under Axes display to control the opacity of the plane nomen axes. Additionally, when Show Nomens is toggled on, the following options are active. You can hover over an individual plane to highlight it in the graphics window. Any other displayed plane nomens are dimmed. Select only when highlighted to display the plane of a nomen when the nomen is highlighted in the graphics window. You can right-click on a plane nomen to access functionality without having to reopen the Planes Manager. In previous Mastercam versions, the Show Nomens button contained a drop-down that controlled the display of the WCS, C-plane, and T-plane nomens. This button was only available on the View tab. In Mastercam 2020, Show Nomens has also been added to the Planes Manager with these new options. WCS displays a static plane nomen at the WCS origin rather than a single color nomen. C-plane displays a static plane nomen at the C-plane origin. T-plane displays a static plane nomen at the T-plane origin. Additionally, the Always Display Nomen option has been moved from the Display Options menu to the Show Nomens menu and has been renamed Selected Planes. This option has the same functionality as it did in previous versions. When Selected Planes is selected and Show Nomens is toggled on, the nomens for all selected planes will always display in the graphics window. Mastercam 2020 includes a number of improvements to chaining. The layout for the wireframe and solid chaining dialogues are more uniform, making the workflow between chaining modes more seamless. New configuration settings for chain color and line style have been added as well. The expand arrow that was located in the upper left corner of the chaining dialogues in previous releases has been removed, and the parameters have been moved to the main dialog box. You can now automatically chain tangent entities or tangent edges by holding the Shift key while selecting an entity or edge. You can also chain tangent entities or edges when at a branch point by holding Shift while clicking a chain arrow, the previous button, or the next button. Control the angle used to determine tangency of entities using the new Chaining Tangency Tolerance option. The Unselect button now removes the last selected chain rather than the last entity of a linked edges chain when in solid mode. Button Previous removes one branch or entity at a time when creating a linked edges chain in solid mode. Clicking this button moves the endpoint of a solid edges chain to the previous branch point. In wireframe mode, clicking the previous button moves the endpoint of a chain to the previous branch point. There have been a number of changes made to solid chaining for Mastercam 2020. Two new selection options are available in the solid chaining dialog box. Choosing Bosses selects only bosses on the selected face. Choosing Cavities selects only cavities in the selected face. Use the Cavities drop-down to filter by blind and through cavities. Two new options, Convert to Edges and Convert to Loops, are available when right-clicking on a loop, face, or partial loop chain for Convert to Edges, or a face chain for Convert to Loops in the Chain Manager. For example, after selecting Convert to Edges, the face chain is converted to an edges chain. Please note that any associativity will be lost after converting. When selecting faces for solid chaining, the following shortcut keys or hotkeys are available. Holding Shift while clicking selects tangent solid faces. Holding Control while clicking selects matching solid fillets and/or holes. Holding Control and Shift while clicking selects similar solid features. You can now window select solid faces as well. The Edge option has been removed and Linked Edges has been moved and renamed to Edges. The Edges option combines the functionality of Edge and Linked Edges. These changes also apply to the Chain Manager dialog box. You can now edit solid chains in the Chain Manager by right-clicking a chain and selecting Edit. When chaining edges, you can now start a new chain by clicking an edge that is not part of the current chain. You can create partial loop chains across multiple solid bodies in the same chaining session. There have been a number of changes made to wireframe chaining as well. You can now adjust the start point for open chains. You can also start a new chain by clicking an entity that is not part of the current chain. You can create multiple disconnected chains in the same wireframe chaining session. The Start and End buttons are now available for partial chaining. Chains with branch points now respect the cursor location for the start point. There have been several improvements to Merge Pattern for Mastercam 2020. You can now use Align to Face or select a transform method such as Dynamic, Mirror, or Scale to position the merged part geometry. Mastercam applies the result color to the merged geometry so that it's easy to identify for further editing. The Reselect button has been renamed Select, but retains the same functionality seen in previous versions of Mastercam. In previous versions of Mastercam, you were limited to merging part geometry into the active level. For Mastercam 2020, you can choose on which level merged geometry will be placed. The new Levels group on the Merge Pattern function panel has three options. Active Level merges the part geometry into the current file's active level. Merged File Levels places the merged part geometry on its original levels. Offset By places the merged part geometry on new levels whose numbers are offset by the value entered in the field. The merged part geometry stays separate from the target part geometry. Mastercam applies your level preferences after you click OK or OK and Create New Operation. Merge Pattern accounts for any level modifications you make to the levels options when you use the Dynamic, Mirror, or Scale methods to position the geometry. However, if you select Active Levels, Mastercam ignores these modifications and merges the part geometry into the original part's active level. You now have more control over the attributes of your merged part as well. In previous Mastercam releases, the Use Current Attributes checkbox applied only the system color and level to the merged part. In Mastercam 2020, you can now apply the current system attributes for color, level, line style, point style, and line width to the entities in your merged part. Changes have been made to certain file types and folder locations for Mastercam 2020. In previous versions, Mastercam used the following default names and locations for installed folders. For Mastercam 2020, the file structures have changed. If you have Mastercam and Mastercam for SolidWorks installed, both products now use the same root folder. If you only have one product installed, only that product folder will be in the root folder. The machine definition and component files now open directly into the Machine Definition Manager or the Control Definition Manager when using Windows Explorer or a command line. Previously, the files opened as a Mastercam part file that required you to open the Machine Definition Manager or Control Definition Manager as an additional step.